We have all been there. You're trying to try something really cool in D&D, but some DM is telling you no, probably because they're following rules as written. Well, we're talking about rules as written, and Shawn told me no, but we're also talking rule of cool on this episode of the Vanguard Chronicles. Welcome, everyone, to the Vanguard Chronicles podcast, where we have an ongoing conversation into the creative process behind the Vanguard, our monthly crowdsourced D&D campaign of interconnected one-shots. I'm one of the hosts and dungeon masters of the Vanguard, Nathan, also known as Spark Ascendant, and I'm joined as always by my co-host and fellow DM, Shawn, also known as General Grom. How are you doing, General?
I'm doing great, Nathan. How are you today?
Doing really well. I swear I'm not going to say we have a really great topic this time, even though we do. Definitely a hot topic. This is a saucy one, I think.
It's definitely a topic that creates a lot of discussion, let's say, in the social channels out there. It can definitely be a contested, discussion on this topic. So yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Certainly is. Well, to not keep people waiting, so specifically we'll be talking about rules as written and the rule of cool, and kind of how we adjudicate between the two of them. We're going to give some definitions. We're going to talk about some tips for how we like to handle them, and then we'll actually be bringing our producer Ryan in to read some suggestions and some scenarios from our community submitted in order to see how we handle them. But before we do that, please, as always, if you want to help us out, if you want to support the Vanguard Chronicles anyway, please please subscribe, read our adventures on vanguardguild.fandom.com. In any of these ways, it continues to help us by driving that engagement and showing us that you care about what we're putting out, because we're having a blast doing that. In addition, you can always check out our charity, which, Shawn, please take it away.
I'm going to try and get this right this time. The charity is called Extra Life. It supports Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, and the monies that we raise help kind of bring a sense of normalcy to these kids' lives while they're dealing with treatment and illnesses, and it helps the families just kind of create moments that we all take for granted, I believe. And some of the cool things that we're doing here, we do at our events is we have a 50-50 raffle. We've raised almost $1,000. Our goal was 1,000, and I believe we're going to go right through that, which I think is fantastic. There's a QR code here on the screen, and also it'll be linked in the description. If you feel inclined, please go donate. But also, we have a couple other things that are kind of cool with that, because we hooked up with a company called Alchemy Crafts, and they made some dice trays for us with the Vanguard logos kind of themed after the houses. And part of those proceeds will go to the charity directly. So we'll have links for that there. You guys can go check that out. I think that's really, really cool. And yes, something we've been talking about, trying to get together. We have them. We'll hopefully get them out to you soon, is t-shirts. Yes, we have some merch coming for all of you. Hopefully you guys will get it, and proceeds with that will also go to the charity. So I'm really excited about it. And for those who have contributed, and those in our members who help every time at the 50-50 raffle and bring more to our event, it's great. Thank you, and we really appreciate it.
I gotta tell you, the dice trays are so cool and this is not a bit, in the 30 seconds while we were waiting for the clock to go so we could start recording, I added to cart and finally checked out with, I have my dice tray on the way.
Nice. Very cool.
So
yeah, anyway, they're very, very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all great and that's fantastic. But as always, I like talking, you like talking, and we have a lot to talk about today.
Yes, we do. Let's get it started.
So let's just start this off by saying, I know typically when you hear the discussion about rules, the rule of cool and rules as written, it usually has the word versus in the middle, because I feel like that kind of gets debated as to, I'm a rule of cool DM, I'm a rules as written DM. And I do want to draw that specifically this episode, we're talking about it as an and, because we don't really want to pit these two styles against each other. And I think we'll get into that a little bit later as we go. So before we do, I think it's probably pertinent that we maybe start with a couple of definitions. out of the gate. Well, Shawn, how would you write rules as written?
Well, again, the pretty self-explanatory when you look at rules as written. It basically is how the rules are put down on in each description for how they want to be defined, and a lot of times it does leave moments of interpretation. But I do believe those rules are printed in a very specific way for a very specific outcome, and that when you apply the rules as written, it shouldn't be to pit yourself against your players as a DM. It should be more as a way to keep the game flowing and narratively as a tool you can use going forward.
If I were to be more callous, I think this is the actually way to play D&D or any other RPG.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Actually, yeah, that's
Yeah,
a
right. This is the this is the rules lawyer style of doing things,
yes,
which
yes,
anyone who, I mean, we live in the States. Anyone who follows the Supreme Court at all, and what is it, judicial review? That's where we start to get into discussions of, well, it's written this way, but how is it interpreted? Which is specifically gets into the next definition that I think is left out of this conversation a lot of times, which is rules as intended. Which, yet again, it's in the name. This is, well, it was written this way, but clearly it wasn't meant to come across that way, right? This is the you know what I mean.
Well, it's the spirit in which I wrote this rule. I wrote this
Precisely.
rule to create this type of way of adjudicating a situation in the spirit, in this spirit. And I think sometimes you're right that in these discussions, rules as intended kind of gets glossed over because it is the written versus the cool, which I've said it. I've said it in previous podcasts. I am a rule of cool DM. I always enjoy the wacky, more super creative ways of accomplishing tasks.
Well, actually, I'm glad you said that because you teed up the next one, which, right? So we talked about rules as intended, right? It's the do what I mean, not what I say. But then
Right.
we take one more step if we're gonna draw these on like a timeline or a number line and grade them, right?
Right.
Now we hit rule of cool. And again, you call yourself a rule of cool DM. Yeah, how exactly would you define that for our listeners at home?
Okay, my definition of the way I look at a rule of cool, or as in sometimes you'll hear it say as rules is fun, is regardless of exactly how the rule is written, there is some leeway. And as a DM, if you can tell me a really fun or extremely narrative, creative way of doing something, and it bends those rules, or and again, we'll talk about this in later in the episode here that you're using rules in a different way. So you're taking the rule and applying it to a different set of skills. So instead of saving throw versus charisma, it might be versus strength. And just so it kind of goes with the flow. For me, if you tell me something cool, I'll make you make a skill check. If you succeed in that skill check, then it'll influence in a good or bad way how you accomplish the task. That's kind of how I do it.
Right. It's sort of it's taking this idea of, we're all playing a game. We're all, at least I hope, playing for the purpose of having fun. I
Right.
know recently on the internet, some particular rules at certain DM tables decided to made it such that I don't know that everyone's having fun, but at least when we play to have fun, right?
Right.
And the problem though is sometimes rules in a game can get in the way of doing what people want to do, and thus as a result that can be made to make the game quote unquote less fun. And so then you
Right.
have that idea of like, yeah, okay, well, it's cool, so I'll let you do it anyway, right? And
Right.
that's where you have some of this dichotomy and this discussion that comes from
Yeah, I think that players a lot of the times have a tendency to take that rule of cool. And I've had players in my game say, "Hey, as a rule of cool, why don't we let this happen that way? Because it'd be really fun." And I'm like, "Yeah, but if it's going to completely break my story, I can't let that happen. Then it becomes a rule of uncool."
So we're going to discuss this topic in a bit more detail, and then we'll give some tips for how we adjudicate and how we specifically navigate some of these waters. We'll even again be looking at some examples from our community of things for us to adjudicate one way or the other live on the air. But before we dig into that as well, if you are also curious and you want someone maybe a little bit more authoritative than us, we've both been DMing for a while, but I highly recommend anyone, especially a new DM in general, just as another tool in your toolkit, to peek the Sage Advice Compendium. This is effectively it's a PDF document written by, I believe, specifically Chris Perkins and some of the other designers at Wizards of the Coast, meant to, as everything from, I think, an errata to an FAQ to just discussion on certain edge cases for how certain rules are intended to work behind certain spells, certain abilities, and everything. And I really think it's worth peeping, because if you haven't seen it, and if you find yourself intimidated by, oh, I gotta, stick to the rules as written, or, oh, I want to make sure my friends are having fun, they lay out very specifically on the very first page of the document these 3 ideas: rules as intended, rules as written, rules
Yep.
as fun, and lay a groundwork for at least how they intend the game to be played itself. I think from my own reading of it, and we discussed this beforehand, I think I typically try to view the rules as tools, and go from there, right? I go back and forth, because sometimes, right, I don't call myself a rules as written or a rule of cool DM, because I do both, right? Depending on what the situation is and how to adapt to it. That's my approach to that particular problem solving. Because the
Yeah,
rule. Yeah, go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I see that the process of, like you said, it is flexible. You have to understand that the rules, adhering to enough rules as written, creates a level of consistency and helps manage the expectation of your players. If you
Exactly.
are all over the place and you keep changing and you keep trying to make up new rules and try to be overly cool, so to speak, you will break your own game and you'll watch it crumble right in front of you. So it is a bad idea, because your players won't trust that you know what you're doing or you have a grip on your story if you keep playing too much with the rule of cool. And
Or
that's
in
why rules are written are there.
or in some cases, I think, I think some of the reason that you have these debates as to which one's, the better one to use or better to do, is because I think sometimes you have a difference in perspective from the different players at the table. And when I say players, that's keeping in mind that the GM is a player at that table. They just have a different way of interacting with the game, right? And I think you have a situation where rule of fun at some tables gets to be, right, I have this cool vision in my head of how my main character does this thing, and, oh, wouldn't it be awesome if this thing happened? Oh, wouldn't it be cool if this? And, like, that's all fine, and that's wonderful, and that's really great, and that's why you're encouraged to bend the rules to fit with that style. But at a certain point, it stops becoming a game and starts becoming, oh, we're all just writing a story, writing our joint novelization together. You know what I mean? And that's where those rules as written become a lot more important.
Well, exactly, and for a level of consistency within your storyline and how you're trying to lay this thing out, you can only push that rule of cool boundary so far, or like I said, you break what you've intended. I know you get into those really cool moments, and you're trying to build on a cool moment, and you want your players, much like humor, it's interpretive, it's subjective.
Right.
What you found funny or what you found cool, and what someone else is finding cool may not jive, and so it is, again, we've in our engaging new players episode, we did talk about how you read your players and you read your room, and you kind of constantly do that just so you can adapt to making sure you're ahead of your players for what they're trying to do, something fun, and you're able to accommodate and make it as fun for them too.
And I think that's part of why, again, I like to view the rules as tools themselves, because
Mm-hmm.
where the pendulum swings the other way, and where I think you get more of a DM perspective, not every DM, I want to be so
Right.
clear here.
Yeah.
Is, right, you have those horror stories that you can read on Reddit of especially back in the day, of DMs wielding the rules as a tool against their players, right? No, you can't do that because I designed this thing in some way, and I'm the DM, and you have to listen to me, and it's not in the rules, so you're not allowed to do it. And, like, I mean, even Gygax broke his own rules all the time in first edition.
Absolutely. That's kind of what makes DMing fun. And for me, what brings kind of the extra level of creativity into it is that ability to be flexible with these rules. And it, to me, it is a narrative game first. That's kind of the fun part of it. It's a dice rolling narrative game, and fun part of it is watching these dice rolls hit against each other and go up and down, and the trends that happen within a game. That's where the internal stories come from. How many times that person rolling that one? How many times that person rolling that 20? From Vega, the divine sniper in our games that can never not roll the highest damage possible, to the to a rogue I just had in my game who couldn't get anything higher than a 4. It was ridiculous.
Well, even like if you look at for people who die on the hill of rules as written. I mean, I'll tell you, I'll give you an example. We one of the interesting questions that we had from some of our players was talking about how do we adjudicate not just rules as written or rule of cool at the table, but even how we do them in between sessions. And I can tell you right now that I use rule of cool a lot in between sessions for a lot of my prep. You know why? Because I use a lot of third-party books. And like I say this as someone who owns a lot of books by MCDM, by Cobalt Press, Green Ronin, by Peterson Games, by any of these. Guess what? Every Cypher, oh my goodness, or Monty Cook Games, every single one of those, if it doesn't have Wizard of the Coast, it is glorified fanfic because it's not official rules. Like it is a rule book, but it's not real rules. Like that wasn't written by Chris Perkins. Like that doesn't count. Like even that is just an example of how within limits, right? The rules are tools that you can use to adjudicate and to keep your game consistent, and also to empower your players to have some of those cool moments, not just, again, a cudgel or a weapon or something to be ignored so we can swap stories.
But I also think there's an implication when you talk about rules that if you're breaking them, you're cheating.
Right.
Cheating is a weird thing in this game. I've had people ask me, who won? Not really a winning thing. Well, why do you play? Well, we enjoy the narrative storytelling. It's a fun way to hang out with friends. But when you have rules, you start to imply cheating. And there are some people who, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I know how that, so, but in this game, in this narrative, we've been blessed. I think people who are vague on the rules are quick to ask us, because every player wants to have the rules and be able to use them to their advantage in any scenario. And again, like you said, it's not up to us as DMs to use these rules as a way to create disadvantage. It is a way for us to adjudicate our narrative choices.
Precisely. So actually, I think that's a great segue and a great opportunity for us to pivot to talking about, certainly for new DMs, some of the ways in which some of the tools and tricks we have for kind of navigating the space and enabling cool moments while also still keeping the game relevant and consistent while sticking to the rules as written. All right, Shawn. Before we get into these community submitted scenarios, try saying that 3 times fast.
Community submitted scenarios. Community submitted scenarios. Community submitted scenarios.
Fine. Point is, before we start to go through these various scenarios for how we would rule through anything following rule of cool, rules as written, let's talk about some of the tricks and tools that we use just to help navigate giving cool moments to our players while still sticking within a rule framework.
That's a great way to start. And we can start off with how you communicate your expectations to your players. A lot of that starts in your session 0. Now, in our game, at the Vanguard, in our monthly game, we have to do that in a very, very short time, but it happens at the beginning of every game. You set up session 0. You can set up expectations from your players, what you expect from them and what they expect from you. And you can kind of get a lot of that out of the way, and also talk about any top sensitive subject. There's been a couple of times I think I went from, you don't like spiders, that they became snakes, because you knew that you may trigger somebody unnecessarily. You don't know until you ask, what's sensitive, what's not.
Right. Like, we talked about this maybe even in a previous episode, but one thing I always say, whether it's at the Vanguard or when I'm running any kind of game, if I have new players, or new to me at least, a phrase I frequently say, and I'll sometimes even repeat it over the course of the session, is, hey, as a DM, I tend to stick to and follow the rules because I'm going to go with the framework. I'm not trying to kill you. The monsters aren't trying to kill you. But with all that said, I always encourage players. I'll say, hey, but if you have a creative idea, if you have something you want to try, if there's something unique you want to do, tell me about it. Right? The worst you can do is ask. And I'm down to let you try anything. And that word "try" holds a lot of weight to it.
Absolutely. I think you you have to let them. I like the term creative rope. You have to give them enough creative rope, hopefully not to hang themselves.
Yeah. Well, actually, I even talking about horrible endings. You've got. I know a lot of people sometimes have heard about the phrase "failing forward." But
Right.
I mean, one of the most basic things you can do is allow opportunities for players to roll forward, right? And by that I
Right.
mean anyone who's heard the term failing forward, it's the idea of I want to jump across the chasm. Okay, make an athletics check. I failed.
Right.
Well, as DM, I could say, well, they die and they fall down the chasm and they die in a horrible death. Or, okay, they failed forward into another situation. Okay, you make it to the ledge, but instead of landing on your feet, you are scrabbling at the end of the cliff. Now give me a dexterity check. Or everyone else in the party has one action of combat to determine how to solve it, right? So instead of them failing into the end and their untimely demise, they failed forward into a more tense scenario. But hey, they're still going. Their plan is being enacted, and they can try and adapt from there.
Well, the dice rolls help kind of shape the narrative weight of what's going on, whether it's a wonderful success or a wonderful failure. I remember one in a game where the gnome was on the other side of a chasm and he was collecting some minerals and he couldn't figure out a way back. So the ranger decided, oh, I'll shoot a arrow into the wall and there'll be a rope and then we'll just swing away that way. And he rolled in that one. So I'm like, well, you just hit the gnome. You just shot an arrow through the gnome's shoulder. And so letting the dice kind of dictate the narrative weight of what happens, and in that same sense, rolling forward or failing forward, you now that the failures add more narrative weight to the next set of dice rolls and the next set of dice rolls.
Exactly. And that's where this communication and rolling forward can really go hand in hand, right? Because communication is not just a session 0 or start of the session thing. It is a, hey, okay, you want to try what now? Okay, so you're saying you want to try to surf down the side of the pyramid as it's lifting into the air and take a couple shots with your bow. Okay, all right. Well, if you're gonna do that, we'll start by having you make just a, you first off, you've got 30 feet of movement,
Right.
but maybe I'll give you a little extra speed on that. Okay, first off, it's gonna be an acrobatics roll. Let's just start there.
Right.
And hey, you should know that you're really high up, so if you fall, you're going to take a lot of damage, right? These are the kind of communications that I think are good to put out because the player gives their intention. So I know as a DM what their goal is, so I'm not trying to rule for something that they don't care about. But also as DM, I'm communicating, and hey, like, oh, here's the stuff your character would know about how hard this task you're requesting is, right?
Yeah, you have to kind of give your player again enough rope, but enough length to make him feel like he's making creative decisions and he's making a cool scenario build up. But then risk, you have to to me it's a balance between risk and reward. Yes, you can try this absolutely ludicrous idea. Your chances of success are really, really slim, but if you want to roll to shoot for that nat 20, sure, go for it. And that also adds fun and narrative weight. It makes that dice roll really important at that moment. And as long as they understand the risk and they're willing to still take the chance, or they understand the reward and they're willing to take the risk, then you let them do it. And again, you can certainly try as a common phrase DMs should always have in your bag.
Well, certainly. And on top of that, I don't want to use the term punish because it's not about punishing, but you can think about trade-offs that might occur on a resulting failure if they try this wacky idea, right? Because if you're trying to bend the rules in a certain way, you're trying to do something a little bit, your character's effectively exerting themselves to do something that they're not normally able to do. I don't want to say consequence, but there's at least some kind of, as you said, risk to it, right? And you can get really creative with the type of risks you take. Like it doesn't just have to be health. One's an easy one to do is if you're doing something magical, maybe it costs an extra spell slot, right? You have to exert yourself more to make that spell bend in the way that you want it to bend.
Trade exhaustion. I use that a lot. If you want to try
Oh,
something,
perfect.
you've got a level of exhaustion coming your way. Yes, you pulled it off, but you are willing to give up something. The game is all about resource management and balance. And players, it always makes me kind of chuckle when I read through our character discussions and what the characters want to do on our Discord, which is a great resource. If you get a chance, check it out. All the links will be in our descriptions and stuff. Is that they are constantly asking for a little bit of an edge. And I'm like,
Right.
you're already OP. You're already overpowered. How much more of an edge do you want? And I just think that's natural for players to say, what do the rules help me? How can I see these rules and interpret these rules in a way that I can get an advantage in a given scenario? I don't
Right.
like the idea of the DM, or as a DM, it's a hammer, or as a player, I have this, I want to solve the entire problem in one roll. Well, that's not
Right.
why we're here.
And as DM, you are arbiter of the rules. You're not keeper and wielder.
Right.
I think of you as an arbiter there, and as a result, it's on you, or it can be on you. Don't be pressured by it, to find creative ways to make the rules work for players. Note, the rules are still working, but they can maybe bend in a certain way. A common thing I like to do actually is, who says you have to use the rules of 5e? Right? I love reading other RPG rule systems and bringing some of them in. We were talking
Absolutely.
about consequences earlier for failed actions. One I love is, if anyone gets the opportunity to read the Blades in the, actually it's the Forged in the Dark system. The first book is, they've done multiple settings. Blades in the Dark is a great example because they have a clock system. The way it works, effectively, you draw a circle and you split it up like it's a pizza pie, and you label the clock. Sometimes you
Okay.
don't label it. Doesn't have to be time related. It can be, how much have you raised the alarm, right? Or how suspicious are you? It can be your GTA wanted level, right?
Right, right, right.
But as certain things occur, as players fail at certain actions or take something really dramatic and try and bend the rules, and it does or doesn't work, you fill in that clock over time, and once it is full, the maximum punishment or whatever it is occurs. So
Right,
it kind of serves as their sixth sense for, like, I tried the thing, but oh, it made a lot of noise, and the guards will probably hear that soon.
right. There's a way to kind of use their idea and use it within your narrative to kind of keep your story on pace and give course and give consequence. Because I think, again, we talk about the DM not wanting. I am not trying to kill you. The players, the monster is trying to kill you, and also, and I know some players, and they get the I want to fight to the death, and it's like, not every creature's going to do that. It's not in their best interest to fight to the death in every scenario, and so they will try to escape. And if you can manage that, then that's another way to, again, the rules allow to it, so it's another way to kind of work with your story. That's what these rules are for, to help you craft a story that your players will enjoy and get into, and give them some groundwork and lay out a framework that we've talked about to allow them to have that kind of fun within the narrative sense. And if you forget that, it can make the game a lot more difficult. And I agree with you. Pull from every source that you have available.
And in fact, actually, Shawn, I believe you even mentioned another trick earlier that we've both talked about before, which is using mismatched ability checks.
Yeah, that's a fun one where you may not necessarily say, okay, this would normally, as the rules say, this is an acrobatics check. But in this case, I'm going to make it a sleight of hand check just for the rogue, for whatever reason. It might, one, he's got an extra ability in that, or something, just feel like he's being more useful to some degree.
A classic one for me is the I'm really strong, but I have low charisma. But I'm really strong. So thus I look like a big, burly, scary guy. So thus I should be able to use my strength for persuade, for intimidation checks. Right. And
Right,
these are things that I can, again, going back to communication, I communicate to my players so they know that I'm the type of DM
right,
who, again, bare minimum, I will hear your pitch.
right. Yeah, I'll hear your pitch. I will decide if it requires. Sometimes it's like, no, that sounds great. Go ahead, run with it. There's really no problem with that idea. You don't even need a check. So that's the idea too, is that not making them roll is a choice to roll. Follow what I mean? So when all the way to, no, you're gonna have to roll this at disadvantage. Why? Well, you wouldn't see that, or you wouldn't know that was happening. You're kind of using it to curb some metagaming, because that does happen. I think
Precisely.
rules are good for helping you keep players from metagaming, I think.
I think really what a lot of it can boil down to is probably what you don't want to hear when you're a new DM, which is, I mean, you use your gut. But the thing is,
Yeah.
I mean, that just comes with time. Like,
Yes.
we'll discuss in a minute some examples of even our time running, but I can tell you right now, I definitely did a lot of things because by rules of cool when I first started, and that's just straight up because I didn't know how the actual proper rules worked, and so I
Right.
was just like, yeah, that should work.
Yeah. I've done that too, where at the end you go back, and I've had those discussions with my players that we may have to retcon this.
Yeah,
Sorry, I made a mistake, and I'll try not to let it happen again. We are people, ultimately.
yeah.
So
And for the record, if you don't trust your own gut, the other great options is there's always other people who've done it. Reddit is a great source. Google is a great source. Countless times, I know I've literally pulled open Google just to say like, okay, how does that rule work? How is that interpreted? Can that be done? Just to see some kind of
yep.
precedent. I'd even throw out actually specifically anyone who it's always good to review the Dungeon Master's Guide if you haven't, specifically Chapter 8 on running the game, and even more specifically page 235. It goes into ability scores and
Right.
the skills and what their definitions are, which then it's something good to just review so that you as a DM can say, okay, this skill is meant to be interpreted in this way, which I can
Right.
then use when a player asks to do this, ask for the right check, or in any other way adjudicate those kinds of scenarios to support your players.
Yeah, exactly. That's, I think, and going with your gut, like again, like you said, it comes from experience, and experience comes from making mistakes, and you can't make mistakes until you try. It's just that simple equation. So you will make mistakes. It's perfectly acceptable. It's not the end of your game, and as long as your players are accommodating, it goes both ways. And I think that's how you set up that kind of groundwork with your players.
I think we owe our listeners an episode down the road where I think we just recount our first ever sessions of Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, that could be interesting. I remember mine vividly, but the first time, I mean, I played as a kid in earliest of editions when it was just D&D, and they didn't even have editions. So, but I'm more of a 5e, and now obviously the new rules are coming out, and there's that to that itself would be a podcast just talking about how things changed.
Yeah. Well, let's not talk about our first scenarios. I think
But
it's time we talk about some scenarios submitted by our community, as well as just a couple that we wanted to share too.
yeah, that'd be great. Why don't we bring we should bring our producer on and get that going.
Let's do it. Alrighty. So, anyone who's listened to the podcast before will recognize the face right above me. This is Ryan, our producer. He also plays Izarina Mimi Wellerton, and he's got some stuff to talk about with us today. So, Ryan, how you doing, bud?
I am doing fantastic. This is going to be probably one of the better segments that we've done. Not that any of them were bad, but this is just full of community engagement. So if if you haven't been keeping up, we've been talking about rule of cool. We've been talking about how do you adjudicate it, rules as written, rules as intended, and we went to the community that we love, and we said, "Hey, everybody, do you have some scenarios that you would love to put on the podcast to have Nathan and Shawn just adjudicate on the spot?" And we got a lot of responses, and some of them were fantastic. Some of them were more theory crafting than anything else. But what we're going to do in this segment is we've got scenarios laid out. I'm going to read them live. Shawn and Nathan are going to go ahead and adjudicate them and talk about what they would do if they would blend some of the rules as written with rule of cool, or just go straight rule of cool through it all. I have a section down here. People kind of mocked me and said, well, you're going to have to hide it a little bit more. But I told them specifically, these are the graphics that you're going to have to stay away from. These are the posts that you're going to have to stay away from. So
I did not see.
you
I
didn't
did
see?
not look. I no.
All right.
I saw the title, and that was it.
Well, none of it.
So honesty, we've got the rule of honesty here. Nobody's seen these except for the first one. The first one I did actually give you guys. We're going to start with a softball. Okay. So the names I'm going to read, some of you may remember Dungeons and Dragons cartoon. Presto wants to cast magic missile at an invisible foe that he knows is going to kill someone in the party soon, but he can't see the creature. Sheila can detect invisibility and wants to aid Presto by shouting out the exact location. Can Sheila aid Presto by casting the spell? Nathan, we'll start with you.
Okay. So, full disclosure, as you said that, I did what I always do when I have to adjudicate a question like this. I went to Google immediately and I pulled up Roll20 because I wanted to have the definition of magic missile.
Perfect.
Magic missile does specifically say you create 3 glowing darts of magical force. Each dart hits a creature of your choice that you can see within range.
Yep.
So they do specify you have to be able to visibly see the creature. Now, one thing I might be willing to do, because I know what the player is trying to do here, is I might emphasize that specification of you have to be able to see. There has to be some visual cue. So in terms of shouting and pointing, that I might not allow. But if there's some other indication, or maybe if so-and-so wants to like throw a bucket of dust or of dirt or give some other visual sign, otherwise what I might do if they still can't come up with something is I might say, you can make the shots, but I might have you make a ranged spell attack on it, right? Because you're trying to figure out if the creature is there. And if I'm really being nice, since Magic Missile auto hits, I might not make you roll at disadvantage, given that it's an invisible creature. That's probably how, at least from the start, that might be how I do it. Because then I give you the ability to try, but there's still a chance of failure there.
Shawn?
So now I will take it in a slightly different direction. As I see it, initiative, because you have a different way of approaching initiative than I do, but to me, where is Sheila in the initiative round? Has she had her turn yet? Is she using her reaction? She still has to give something up. In my mind, she'd have to give something up to be able to make that shout happen. Right. So it's her reaction. Let's just say she already used a reaction, then no, you couldn't do it. But if she hadn't used a reaction yet, okay, fine. Then it is still, I'm going to have her roll an insight at disadvantage because even though she's casting detect invisibility, when did she cast it? You follow what I'm saying? Like, does she instantaneously do it? She can only do it on her turn. If her turn had already happened and she didn't cast detect invisibility, she can't just retro use it. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
So
when
let's
did
set
she
the
come?
caveat out, because you're going to see a lot of this in the.
This is what I'm curious about. What
5
changes?
to 10 different scenarios, hopefully, that we can get through. There's a little caveat. Let's say that they had already cast detect invisibility. They could already see the creature, right? Had already shouted it out. This creature exists, right? But per what Nathan said, that magic missile can't hit what it can't see.
Right, true. And then there's also this trade-off. Okay, if she had cast it early, my thought would be he has to be able to receive what she is saying.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an insight check on his end. Do I actually? Is he or is Presto interpreting what she's saying correctly?
Okay.
So then it's an insight check. You still have to make some check against an abnormal set of scenarios. She's trying to do something out of her turn. And speaking is a free action. You can do that at any time. So is she using her reaction? No. Okay, fine. She already cast it. So how is she communicating this information, and then how is it received? So I would honestly make Presto make an insight check, and if he succeeds on it, then he actually hears what she's saying, and he's able to cast the spell on the right and execute it.
Okay. Second scenario. Here we go. Shawn, this one's going to start with you. Boy. Presto wants to blind the enemy by casting darkness on a javelin that Bobby wants to throw at the target. Bobby's looking to make the shot count and wants the weapon to sink deep enough to stick. You have the scenario?
Okay, yeah. Let me think it through here. So you're saying that Presto casts darkness on the javelin?
Yes.
Okay. So,
So if you need me to pull up a spell, the darkness spell itself,
let's
I'll go ahead and grab
that
for you. There's a couple of key points in here, but I'll read it out loud. The magical darkness spreads from a point that you choose within a range to fill a 15-foot radius sphere for the duration. Darkness spreads around corners, and let's say this creature doesn't have dark vision. If the point that you choose is on an object you're holding, or one that isn't being worn or carried, the darkness emanates from the object and moves with it, completely covering the source of the darkness. With an opaque object, such as a bowl or a helm, blocks the darkness. We'll just leave it at that.
So you're saying, because it's on a javelin, but it's not being carried or worn. It doesn't say anything about being thrown. So can you throw magical darkness?
Well, he's
I
putting it
actually
on
had a
the
thought on that.
javelin,
Right,
and the
with the intent
javelin
to
is
throw
being
it.
thrown. Right. So it can be put on an
Right.
object.
But can it be, does it say that object can be thrown?
The object, that the
It
spell
says it's
doesn't
when
say
being
it.
worn or carried. So I said worn or carried. And again, that's usually when I default in my ruling is I will default to what it actually says. And in this case, I might say that the darkness can emanate, but it can't be moved. Once it starts, it just emanates from that point. And then when he throws it, he's just throwing it in the darkness.
Okay. So
But that would be my
key
ruling.
point says if the point you choose is on an object you're holding, the darkness emanates from the object. So
Right,
you
you
could
are
technically
holding.
put it on an object.
But it's an object you are holding. You're no
Could
longer
be.
holding it when you
Right.
throw it.
Now remember, rules is written, rules is cool.
Right. Now, in this sense, there might be a cool way to say, all right, fine. I think I make a check. I would honestly.
Okay. Nathan's
when you're looking at an object is holding. No, I'm gonna give this to Nathan. You go ahead. All right, go ahead, Nathan.
Good.
Put me in, coach. So my first thought. So one of my first thoughts on this one is while we were doing that, I quickly read the light spell, because I think about the light spell. That is, you just take an item, it glows. It does very distinctly. It is written differently than darkness is. So I think, Shawn, you do raise a good point that clearly light is you make an object shed light now. Darkness is it's attached to that object, which, as you said, is being worn or carried. Fun fact, that's not where I had an issue or where I will make things harder. I think actually I would let the spell work as they intend there in that scenario. But here's the trade-off. First off, I've had players who've asked for very specific targets before, like, oh, I want to try and hit him in the eyes to blind him or whatever. And a common thing I'll do there is, okay, cool, well, the DC's bumped up. And for the record, if you miss that armor class, then guess what? It's a total miss of the attack, right? So I will express that out of the gate. I might not tell them how much the DC's increased. I'll just say that it's been increased, or the AC, the armor class, excuse me. But the part that I wanted to know is, I'm sorry, what is the radius on that darkness spell? On the point of the darkness?
I have to go back to the spell.
It is specifically a 15-foot radius sphere from the point.
Yeah.
Cool. So, gentlemen and listeners, I want you to imagine you have a spear in your hand.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to imagine that a 15-foot darkness bubble emanates from that sphere. What can you see?
Right.
So, I would allow it, and the reason being is for it to penetrate, you have a higher DC out the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Depending on how nice I am, I might do only one of these two, but bare minimum, I'm already thinking that to make it stick. And then as a follow-up, you're rolling with disadvantage because you're blind, because you have the darkness bubble around you as you take the shot.
Right.
Okay.
So again, that's the trade-off. Like, if you want to make this happen, like, I think it's really cool, and especially as a ranged attack. But I'll let you try it and bend the spell that way, because it's already difficult enough from the way you're trying to do it.
I thought the funny part of this, which is crazy, because you have 3 people, 3 DMs, 3 totally different points of view. I would ask them where they put it on the spear or on the javelin, because if it's on the tip and it penetrates them, your body's opaque.
Right.
Oh,
it would just
but it
go
goes around
away.
corners.
It'd just go right away. But that's a good indication of you know, 3 people interpreting the rules 3 different ways, trying to make it cool for, you know, for whomever is attempting this. All right. Scenario 3. Hank the Ranger is about to get hit with a crossbow bolt and drop to 0 HP. Eric the Cavalier wants to use his reaction to take the blow for him. Nathan, would you allow that?
So purely, this is just he wants to get in the way and take the shot.
This is the first
Does he have any
variation of this? Yes.
Does he have any ability that allows him to do so?
Let's say no, because we're talking about rule of cool. Rules is written, you got it. Absolutely, us DMs are going to say use it. So let's say no.
So this is one specifically where, because there is no mechanic or such to allow there, like this, like it's one thing if it's, hey, I have this thing, like I think paladins have like a protection or defender
Yep,
as a fighting
that's
style, as a
correct.
martial archetype, I think it is. I believe fighters have it too.
Mm-hmm.
I might be able to start to hear an argument, but like with any of these, if we're gonna bend the rules, you got to make me a pitch.
Okay.
And so if you're like, I just want to take the shot, to me, that sounds like a request I'd get from a newer player who doesn't know the rules as much and wants to do what sounds cool, but the enemy made the target. And part of them rolling that attack roll was their ability to hit their target, knowing you're right next to them. I think in this instance, the
Okay.
most I might do, depending on position, is I might bump the AC because of partial cover. Maybe.
Again, to me, it comes about what does he have for his reaction? He can't use his movement out of his turn, so he can't move in front of another player. It's not on his turn. So that is, you can position yourself, I want to use my reaction to cast shield, or that's different. If you're close enough and you can use a spell as that, falls within that reaction casting time, then yeah, I'm fine with him doing that. But I don't, again, its initiative order has a little bit to do with it. And you can't just have free actions just because you want them.
Okay. What if
There's
it was
movement
critical?
and required for a reason. What do you mean critical?
What if it was critical? This was a critical strike. Would that make any difference?
Oh, no.
No?
Yeah, no, that then you distinctly do fail.
Okay.
Like because
What
again, the enemy, they landed the blow, it's a critical hit, and they get the crits too.
Right.
if
Yeah.
you knew that the
I love this
person
game.
using their reaction was going to also drop to 0 hit points? So the player said,
I
in
don't.
doing this, I would
You're allowing him to
sacrifice my life. Would you allow it?
Still wouldn't let him do it.
No.
No.
Wow.
Nope.
No. Okay.
Doesn't have any movement. It's movement. He can't just free action move.
What if he was
I
right
think it's
next,
so funny.
right next to him with a reaction available?
I
Maybe
think
with the
it's so
reaction
funny.
available, and it'd be a dexterity, some kind of saving throw or some kind of skill check to make sure he gets involved. Because I agree with Nathan. It is he's trying to hit the target, and he rolled high enough to hit the target. You can't just, I decided to get in the way.
Okay.
I think it's so funny that Shawn's the rule of cool DM, and I think I'm being nicer. I think in this instance, I have one idea that I might let
Sure.
the dice decide on this one.
Okay.
And the way I might decide it is I might say, and again, this is a might. It depends on the moment. It depends on my gut feeling. It depends on a couple other scenarios in the moment. But another thing you could even do is take what I said earlier, where I said maybe the DC you bump the armor class of the player up. Let's say that your armor class is 15, the enemy rolls, and you Ryan say, I want to take the shot, so I try and use my reaction to block it.
Mhm.
Cool. So you add 3 minutes to, or sorry, you add 3 points to the armor class.
Right.
Cool. Those 3 points are your hit. AKA, if the enemy rolls a 1 through 15, their target's AC, they would take the damage, and thus their target would be the one who goes down. If I adjudicated and decide to let you give them an extra 3 AC, that means if on a 16, 17, 18, that is the extra bit of cover you gave them. So you will be the one to take the damage on that. So then it still leaves it to the die to decide.
Right.
And again, that's a 15, 15 makes it so that it doesn't work. 3, you had a chance to be a hero and can have that cool moment.
Okay. All right. 4th scenario, Shawn, you're going to start us off. Our heroes are fighting an underwater menace, a big, bad, evil whale. Diana the acrobat wants to jump from a ledge 60 feet above the fight, plunging her javelin quarterstaff as she enters the water into the whale. That's the scenario.
Okay. Well, it would start with an acrobatics check, obviously. Can she make the proper leap in the air? And if she makes that, then the attack has to happen. 60 feet. What's she's a acrobat, I think, in that case, or a monk. What's the fall? How far can they fall? I would have to
So
determine.
full damage in general is 1d6 every 10 feet, right? So you're gonna
Feet, right.
roll basically 66. If you
Yeah,
but
6.
but it's entering water, so I won't tell you
Well,
so you tell
have
me.
you ever jumped into water at feet first at 60 feet, and that
30
water
feet,
becomes
but
concrete?
not 60 now.
Even at 30 feet, it becomes concrete if you hit it the wrong way. So
Mhm.
again,
Yeah.
the athletics check to
Okay.
make if she's acrobatic enough to enter the water properly, to not break something or even cause herself some damage, I may reduce the level of damage. Instead of 66, I may take a couple d6 out of it,
Okay.
to make her, and then have her save against that to take half that kind of fall damage. But again, it's the attack on the whale, how she's attacking, making a strike. Is the whale surfaced, or is she trying to dive in the water? I mean, I would find that a little ineffectual, but that would be the first place to start, is the acrobatics checks to make sure she can actually land in the water without injuring herself.
Okay. Any thought on the damage?
I said I would reduce the damage if she made
No,
the
I'm sorry.
acrobatics check.
Damage against the big bad evil whale. Regular damage,
I
increased
wouldn't,
damage.
or increased damage. Hitting water. I know what you're thinking, and the player's trying to gain a little extra
Right. Trying to
force
get that speed, that
by
torpedo speed.
right, a little
The
mass
Dark Souls
versus
plunge
Yeah,
attack.
right, a little
exactly.
mass, terminal velocity.
Yeah.
At 60 feet, you don't actually. I mean, from a physics point of view, I don't think you can reach terminal velocity in 60 feet and actually add any more damage. But it is a cool thing. So if they make the athletics check, I might even add. Uh, yeah, I mean, I would go with the acrobatics check to make sure that they can do the deed. If the strike happens, I probably wouldn't add any extra damage.
Okay.
I wouldn't think to.
All right. Nathan?
I think so. Yeah. So this is might be a case point where I'm going to communicate early. The first thing I want to say is like, okay, you can try it, but let's be clear. If you miss the whale, you're hitting the water, and it's going to hurt real bad. You're jumping from 60 feet up. The other piece, so like automatically I have that, because then that's the calculation, and as to whether or not they're going to do it, that's all the info they're going to have. So they don't know how much it's going to hurt until they land.
Yep.
Right? They say, all right, I'm jumping. Cool. If they miss the whale, this is real easy. Yeah, we roll the 60 or 66
Yep.
damage. I believe it's above 10. Yeah, they make their resistance, roll against that, easy. If they hit the whale, I've had this kind of scenario before, and I go back and forth. One that I like to use sometimes is I might say, okay, cool, I'm still rolling the fall damage, but I might have it split between you and your target, right? So if I roll 60 damage on 6d6, because I'm rolling really hot tonight, right? If I roll 60 damage and you hit, I might say the whale takes 30, you take 30. Or I might have some other kind of roll to maybe contest, again, maybe a constitution against the two of you to see who absorbs more of the blow, something like that to determine how that damage gets split.
Okay.
But it's still, you are taking damage regardless, because you're still jumping from really high height. If I jump off the Empire State Building and land on someone, guess what? They're going to say ow too.
Right. All right. So 5. We're going to go back to the
Number
invisibility.
5.
Sheila the thief sees something that is invisible and wants to cast the light spell on it to mark it for the group so that they know where it is. Nathan?
Okay, so I love and hate this game. So you touch one object that is no larger than 10 feet in any dimension until the spell ends. The object sheds bright light in a 20-foot radius and dim light initial. The light can be colored as you like. Completely covering the object with something opaque. Completely covering. Okay, that's just if I cover it up, it blocks light. Okay, cool. That. God, if we're actually getting to like physics here, would it not just become like actually just a being of light because the outsides are all in this metaphysical really quick? Yeah, I think
I've got some variations on this, so give me a quick reaction to can you
the object
can
still
it be
gives off
seen?
the object still gives off light. Huh?
Okay. No.
Yeah,
I'm
the object still gives off light. Is where I go.
right. So we got other variations on this. So quick reaction to the light. So yes, you'd say it's emanating light.
Yeah.
People can
So
see it.
she's. I don't think the creature's invisible, and
Mhm.
you're touching it with light.
Yep.
All it's doing is beaming light. You're just seeing the light. You're not seeing the creature. Light will
Yeah,
go.
exactly.
If you're invisible, light goes right through you. So you're just a big bright light with no actual. It's not fairy fire.
So
It doesn't fall under fairy fire. So it doesn't
would you
outline
be
the
able to
creature.
allow the other people to try and hit it?
No, but not. It's still disadvantage. You're just looking at a big bright light. It's still invisible.
Is it disadvantage
You
or
ever
can't
shine?
see it?
Still disadvantage. It's still the same. The still element of invisibility still exists.
Okay.
So again, you're clear. It's the best way to describe it. Light's going right through you. You can't. There's no purchase. There's no definition. It's not fairy fire.
Okay. So
You're not casting a shadow of being invisible.
Let me give you a variation. How about an inkwell?
Ink is physical. If
Mhm.
you're standing in water, if somebody throws mud at you, if dust, any of the things can outline you, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But light is just a beam of light. It's just a bright light. There's nothing stopping it. So it would just be this emanating light. You still can't see what's in it. Is what I'm saying.
So let me ask you this. So you've got the inkwell. Shawn says, all right. You throw ink all over it. Yeah, absolutely. Becomes an outline. Nathan?
Okay, so basically you're jerry rigging or fairy fire. Is that what we're doing?
The question becomes, again, I for full disclosure, I have to research all of the rules, and these guys have to adjudicate on the spot without seeing them or without quickly Googling them. Remember, invisibility as it stands, I'll read the rules out. An invisible creature is impossible to see for the purpose of hiding. The creature's location be detected. And one of the key points of greater invisibility, right? It's anything it's wearing or carrying. So it says, I want to throw an ink well. I want to splatter ink all over it. Is the creature now wearing or carrying it? Would you allow that sort of heroic moment of outlining them?
Oh, absolutely. Any that paint, blood, anything, water, rain. You can't. I don't care how invisible you're trying to be. If you're standing in water, I know where you are. I can see the outlines of your feet.
Okay.
I'd say especially because you see that substance dripping off, and I mean, it also just following a precedent, like that's literally why, people will carry like a bag of dust. So that way to throw onto something. I'd say it's not necessarily being worn. If you want to be mean, you might say that like for a round of combat, right, until it settles on them,
right,
they're visible. At which point now it's settled on them and whoosh, it vanishes.
But it can still be wiped off.
But I'm following precedent on this one.
Think about this too. If all right, you throw ink and I block it, the person blocks it with his bare hands. Then he grabs a glove and covers it. He's still carrying and wearing, and that stuff is invisible. As soon as he puts his hand in the glove, his hand becomes invisible again. The invisible condition, if you're going to throw an inkwell at someone who you think is invisible, you have a disadvantage anyway to try to hit them. So as soon as you did hit them, you succeeded in actually hitting them. Yes, like I agree with you. For a round, maybe 2 rounds of combat, then you have a +2 to AC, much like fairy fire.
Okay.
But light, no. Just casting light on something, if you don't see the person, how do you know what object you're casting it on? And remember, that person, if he's wearing an object, is it still emanating light when it's invisible? No, he's wearing it. It becomes invisible like everything else.
Oh, because if it's invisible, it's not giving off any light. No, because
it's not a beacon you can lay on his head. It is literally, okay, I put it on your limb. Think about it. I'm invisible, and the things I'm wearing are invisible. You just put light on one of the things I'm wearing. It's invisible
because you're giving off light. Right. Oh, that one hurts.
So that's rules. That's rules as written, right? Versus rules as cool. These are all the things that we're adjudicating on the spot.
Well, no, I think this is a great game. I think on the spot, no, light on an invisible object. First of all, getting it on an invisible
object. Yeah, so we're clear. All I googled was the definitions that you've been reading. Yeah. But aside from that, it's funny. This game was fun in questions 1 through 4. I don't like 5.
Wait
I
till
don't
I,
like
okay, wait till I get to 6 and 7. 6.
I don't
This
want
is for
to.
you, Shawn. Presto is
all right.
in a huge fight with the sea hag
Presto's
underwater.
a difficult
This
person,
is
by
for
the way.
you, Gordon. Presto is in a huge fight with a sea hag underwater. He wants to create a sort of compression bomb by casting destroy water around the area.
All right, what's destroy water? What's the
So I'll read
the
create or destroy water. Okay.
Mhm.
So destroy specifically, you destroy up to 10 gallons of water in an open container within range. Alternatively, you destroy fog in a 30-foot cube radius within range. There are upcasts to this, additional 10 gallons of water per upcast. Okay. But I'll leave it
What level
there.
is Presto casting is that?
Let's say 50 gallons of water.
50 gallons of water. Where is he in the ocean or
Yep.
is he in a lake? An ocean? 50 gallons
Bottom of the
yeah.
ocean.
Okay. Couple of things are going to go wrong with that. Where is he casting it? I don't know. At a specific spot?
Yep.
Is that what he does? Okay. It's going to be like an implosion. Yes. All that water will disappear and then the water will collapse upon itself. I don't think it's going to cause that much damage.
Okay.
Because 50 gallons is nothing in an ocean.
Okay.
It's like an air bubble. Depending on, but it is a cool idea, and I would probably apply some maybe bludgeoning damage in that regard. I would definitely not completely rob him of the idea.
Okay.
Nathan, what do you got?
So in this scenario, the players are themselves underwater,
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
Okay, so it's a combat that's taking place underwater. Yeah, Is anyone else envisioning what 50 milk jugs look like? Just to get a sense of
in an ocean.
I did Google this beforehand, and I did get an idea. Yes, I am positive that there are physics majors that are going to rake me over the coals for saying that this is not insignificant, but it is also not significant.
Yeah, I would say
it also depends on the atmospheric pressure.
Yeah, I'd say, and that brings another question.
Is there a D20 for that?
Context does a lot here, and I think it's really the big determining factor is I'm looking at who we're fighting. And you said a sea hag?
Sea hag, yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay, aka she's used to high pressure underwater. So this isn't like the scene in Pacific Rim where a nuke goes off underwater and like the entire radius of a nuke collapses down. Yeah, it is relatively small for a sea hag. So in that context, I think it will not go. I might, if I'm nice, I might give him like a D4 or 2 of bludgeoning.
Okay.
So it's thing, but it'll be minimal.
Shawn, what was the damage that you would
I would probably, it's the same thing with Nathan. I would probably, depending on what was the spell, if the spell itself had destroy water doesn't really do damage, so you're gonna have to kind of come up with that.
Right.
I might give him a D6, maybe 2D4 tops.
Maybe make it a guaranteed hit because they choose the location. So it's like a oh shit, I didn't bring magic missile. I'm underwater. I could have this weak version in just this scenario, but that's it.
Okay. This was something I adjudicated in a game myself, which is why it was
okay. So how did you do it
for our community?
Then how did you do it?
Well, I will tell you that the rules were completely misread. Right. So as with everything, there was a 30-foot cube dissipating. That was missed per the rules, but what was read was 30-foot cubic water just being destroyed.
That's a lot more water. Yeah,
that's a lot of water.
30 cubic feet.
So I think I gave
a lot of water.
I think I gave 3d10 for that.
Okay.
I basically gave a D10. It was usually like I was like thinking, all right, a D6 for every 10 feet bludgeoning damage. That might work, but it's a super cool idea. So 3d10. So I basically just said, okay, I'm going to give just, a better dice roll, same amount of dice in that regard.
Okay.
That's how I adjudicated it. But then he the next day he said, "Oh, by the way," I said, "Oh crap." And I read the spell, which goes to show you all the players read your spells. Please read your spells. Should have known that, but I didn't. Okay. Last one, because we're pressured on time here. We have like 2-3 more, but this is the last one.
Oh my
okay.
God.
Let's be the last one. Let's do it
fan.
here.
This is the fan favorite. This was
Oh, no.
this was gonna get people riled up, so we might go a little long in this episode because of this. But I promise you, if you're hanging in
Okay.
here this long, it's absolutely worth the drama, baby. Hank,
Oh, no.
Oh,
wait, no,
no.
sorry, I gotta back up. Fan favorite: Bobby is unconscious, and Presto wants to save him by casting Dimension Door and pulling him through. Can they do that to save them from imminent death? Not just willy-nilly. He's gonna die. He's absolutely gonna die. And I want to find some way to get my friend back through Dimension Door.
Nathan, go ahead.
Now,
Yes, this one's.
we've already adjudicated on this. We've already put a
Yep.
rule in place. We'll explain
Right.
why. But I'm challenging you guys. Give me a reason to see it from a player's perspective as to why they should be able to do this. There's your challenge.
So, okay. So, for why they should or should not be able to.
Why they
all,
should. We all agree on this, by the way.
Okay, yeah. As far as why they can, I mean, because I think the reason players believe they should be able to, right, is because typically when you take an out, I think the shorthand comes out as I am taking an ally through, right? We take a willing creature as, well, it's my ally. Of course they're gonna come with me.
Right.
So rarely does that matter. And also, if you were conscious, you very much would want to come with me and avoid certain death. That's why players want to do it.
Right.
Okay.
I don't think they should. No, I agree with you. That's why they want to. It is definitely, I want to save my friend, and I should be able to do this. But willing is a tough word there.
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
It is. And that's the one thing
And,
that we all agreed on. And in fact, the rules master of D&D also agreed on himself there that, Jeremy Crawford basically stated in a tweet that, if you are unconscious, you cannot be willing. But we've
You are
got a
not
lot of
willing.
back and forth from that. We've come up with a heroic retreat rule. So this was kind of a fun thing that
Right.
just to bring us back to rules as tools, right? We all agreed as a community that if you are subject to certain checks, may they be strength or other, to lift that creature up, and depending on the situation, other checks, and are willing, you can also retreat with somebody casting Dimension Door if you spend your action picking them up. And in addition, you must also spend, I believe we said it was a bonus action. It's a free action to drop them on the ground, but if you're dead, if you're not dead, you're pretty much going to be dead at that point. But we said as a bonus action, you can gently lift him to the ground, but you cannot fight. And if you could, at least with one size larger than the creature than you're holding, it would be a disadvantage. So we put severe restrictions on it in compromise with the community.
Right.
And this is a great example of us trying to come to an agreement with those homebrew rules in between, saying, I understand you want to do this rule of cool now. In between sessions, let's come up with something that makes you feel heroic, makes you, like Shawn says, just, you got to give up something to get something, right? And at that point, get you what you want, try and get that heroic, retreat in where you can get through and save your allies that way. So I think with that, we have a couple other scenarios. People were fantastic in their participation, but I think we got to probably move on and get to the next portion of the show, get to the conclusion here. So thank you guys very much for putting yourselves on the spot for this. I think the community is going to have a lot of fun, and there'll be probably a lot of talk with in between people about the different rules and how we can probably make it better for people.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank
you very much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. That was fun.
Well, that was a lot of fun. At least in the first half it was. Second half, Lord Almighty. So, Shawn, we've talked a lot about the rule of cool and rules as written. A lot about rules adjudicating in general today. But you have any final thoughts for the people?
Yeah, you got to realize that these are rules that are meant to be interpreted in various different ways. So you have to really be accommodating in that and adapt as a DM so that you don't uh you don't let your players get off track too much, and you want to be consistent. So knowing the rules is important, but knowing when to break them is also a skill to learn.
Yeah, I think too many times we as DMs, especially newer DMs, can get caught up in having to do it right and having to be sure that it's fair and strict to right the rules. But I think what's most important to your players who are sitting around your table is that you are acknowledging the creativity that they are bringing to the stories you are telling. And I think when you try and use the rules as a tool, you might be able to find ways to make them feel heard, even if you don't give them everything they want.
Yeah,
But
true. That's very, very true.
yeah, right. So that being said, for our question of the not the week question of the episode this time, this is a really simple one, and I think it'll be one that a lot of people can respond to quite easily. We just like to hear from you. What was a time that a DM allowed you to bend things to the rule of cool in a memorable and preferably fair way? It can be something big, it can be something small, it can be something you and your friends still talk about, or just a personal memory of yours. But whatever it was, we're looking forward to reading them. As far as next
Absolutely.
yeah, as far as next episode goes, we're gonna get a little bit more nitty gritty with some of the design. We'll be talking about something we have to do a lot for the Vanguard, which is designing one shots for low level players. So
Yeah, that's a challenge. It's something that we've brought up many a time. Scaling your adventures in case you have a mixture of players at different levels. So yeah, it'll be a fun topic to talk about our different ways of creating one shots for low level players.
certainly will. Well, Shawn, hit him with the niceties and your announcement.
Yeah, a couple good things. First of all, like and subscribe, please. It really does help us. And those that have, we really appreciate it. And thanks for being along. If you really like the content, let us know. Please comment. All that does help us kind of become better at this. And another quick announcement: I will be at San Diego Comic-Con this year, roaming around, having a good time. I went last year and it was a lot of fun. I will be taking a bunch of pictures. And if you happen to see me, please come up and say hi. I would love to meet you.
I can't wait for the first handshakes we get at cons. We'll have to look at going to some other cons maybe in the near future, but that'll be for
Yes.
another time. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching the Vanguard Chronicles podcast. If you want to read more about the adventures of our players and our ongoing campaign, or even read some of their dispatches, you can find them at vanguardguild.fandom.com. If you want to support our charity with Extra Life, you can go to their website and search for the Vanguard. And of course, if you want to support us directly, you know the drill. Like, comment, subscribe, and answer that question of the week. Thank you again for listening to the Vanguard Chronicles, and we'll see you on the next one.